Fierce fighting between the ISIL and Kurdish fighters in the Syrian town of Kobani has claimed 400 lives so far. Why is Turkey not reacting to the Takfiri group's advance towards this town, which is on their border? In this edition of The Debate, we'll discuss Turkey's support of the ISIL, why they are so keen in tying in their fight against the militants with Assad to be forced out of power, and whether this is coordinated with the U.S. and its coalition.
It's been 4 months since the notorious ISIL Takfiri group started attacks in Iraq amid its long fight against the government in neighboring Syria. The group has seized large parts of both countries and continues to make advances despite the ongoing airstrikes by a US-led coalition. The Syrian city of Kobani on Turkey's border is one of the areas currently grappling with the ISIL. Kurdish fighters are resisting the militants there. However, they are critical of Turkey for undermining the city's defense by preventing Kurdish militiamen from crossing the border into Kobani to help in the fight.
We are besieged by Turkey. It is not something new.
Protests by Kurdish people have been held across Europe, demanding more help for Kobani. Clashes have also taken place during similar demonstrations in Turkey. Angry protesters accuse Ankara of inaction over ISIL attack on Kobani. Turkish cities in the past months have witnessed rallies over the government's support for militant groups in Iraq and Syria, including the ISIL. In addition to popular protests, the opposition has at various occasions blasted the government for backing the militants, saying that such a policy damages Turkey's image in the international arena. The main opposition, the Republican People's Party, known as CHP, says that the latest government motion approved by the parliament is not against the ISIL, it's actually against Syria. The CHP leader says that there's a perception in the West that Turkey is backing the ISIL.
This perception is correct. ISIL has offices in Turkey. They have units that gather members in Turkey. All of these are known things.
Under the motion, Turkey would be able to deploy forces to Iraq and Syria as part of operations against the ISIL. On Monday, Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu said that his country could send troops into Syria if others do their own part. He also said Turkey is ready for any kind of action to fight the ISIL, provided that a coordinated international strategy is created against the government of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad.
Turkey, by refusing to take action and allowing the slaughter of the Kurds, in fact, is killing two birds with one stone. One, well, they're getting rid of the Kurds, which they've always oppressed. And secondly, he's sending an open invitation to NATO to invade another country, i.e. Syria.
Turkey has repeatedly called for no-fly zones in Syria. It also hosted meetings to coordinate the ISIL's plan to attack Iraq's northern city of Mosul that fell into the militants' hands in June.
Why would Turkey cooperate when we know from past wars that every war has its spillover, and Turkey will not remain immune from this. And we already see the demonstrations and the uprisings. So there will be a big price to pay for Turkey as well.
Let's find out what Turkey's goals are in this operation. Let me introduce our guest, author and historian Dr. Webster Griffin Tarpley joins us from Washington. We have political commentator Jihad Mouracadeh, who joins us from Beirut. Gentlemen, welcome. Before we talk about Turkey, Jihad Mouracadeh, on targeting the ISIL, how's the U.S. air campaign working out? People fighting on the ground say that the aerial campaign is not enough and it's not working.
It's early days for the air campaign to work because you don't have serious troops on the ground right now. In Iraq, you have the Iraqi army. And you have the Peshmerga, and you have some Iranian Revolutionary Guard, but it is not yet good enough. In Syria, you do not have yet any troops on the ground. Eventually, one of these days, probably you'll have the Turkish army, which will be the troops on the ground in Syria. It is too early to say about the air campaign, whether it's working or not.
Dr. Tarpley, Jihad Mouracadeh talks about possibility of Turkish troops being on the ground there, but we know that Turkey has some prerequisites. The Turkish president coming out saying we want a no-fly zone, we want to secure a zone parallel to the region to be declared, and for the moderate opposition in Syria and Iraq to be trained and equipped, and of course with the focus being on the ousting of Assad. So given those prerequisites, do you foresee Turkish troops to be deployed?
I think this is a grave danger, which I would oppose. Turkey can do a couple of very simple things. First of all, stop meddling in Syria. Don't meddle more, meddle less. Butt out of Syria. Erdogan's meddling, Davutoglu's meddling has done enough damage. What they ought to do is simply to close that long border. Don't let ISIS fighters cross the border. Crack down on smuggling. Right? We've seen that line of tanks on that hill. Well, you can extend that in a number of directions and begin to cut off the logistics. Everybody knows that Saudi Arabia and other countries have been financing, and Qatar in particular, have been sending in logistics, money, support, fighters through southern Turkey. If you cut that off, you will have really done serious damage to Turkey. And I would also point out, here in Washington, everybody's still talking about the outburst of our vice president, Joe Biden, who is, of course, famous for making all kinds of statements. But on Friday, I think he told a good piece of the truth at his speech at Harvard at the Kennedy School. He said, look, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates were so obsessed with overthrowing Assad in Syria that they began supporting al-Qaeda and Nusra, and they gave them all kinds of weapons and money and so forth. Now, Biden portrays himself as somebody trying to say no to the Turks, and he even claimed that Erdogan had confessed when he came to the United Nations. He confessed to Biden that this had been a terrible mistake. Now, we've just had a big diplomatic row, ending, unfortunately, with Biden saying, I'm sorry, I didn't really mean it. But everybody knows this is true. But of course, there's also the other part, the CIA part, the MI6 part, the French part, because we've known, for example, that the CIA has officers in southern Turkey who have been directing the flows of weapons to this or that group, or at least trying to. It's a scandal. Turkey has received billions upon billions of dollars of U.S. military aid. They are clearly supporting ISIS. They would like to use ISIS as a gambit, as a pretext to invade Syria, and then later as something that they can use against Assad, perhaps against other countries, against Lebanon, against Hezbollah, against Iran. This list of megalomaniac
we are going too far. We are going too far here.
There doesn't end.
Right.
We are going too far here.
Go ahead, Jihad Mouracadeh.
No. I mean, yes, of course, and we can use Turkey against Hezbollah, against Israel, and so on. No, I think we are going too far. The real point here is that the Turkish Parliament has taken the decision 298 for and 98 against, basically saying that they support Turkish intervention in Syria against ISIS. Now, what the Turkish government will do, when would they do it, we do not know exactly. Militarily speaking, all the plans are ready. We can all see that on TV, that the Turkish tanks are ready. They have the military plans. They are just waiting for Mr. Erdogan, the president, to push the button. In my opinion, Turkey is waiting for some kind of a price, and Mr. Davutoglu, with Christian Amanpour on CNN, said it very frankly and openly. The price is to get rid of the regime of President Bashar al-Assad. The reason he gave, which was very interesting, he said, you get rid of ISIS, which is fine, but at the same time, who is bombing all these cities which are producing the refugees? It is the regime of President Bashar al-Assad. So we get rid of ISIS, and then the same regime goes on bombing these cities, then these refugees will come to Turkey again. So we have not done anything. So either we find a solution or we not find a solution. But just going in just for ISIS' sake. Now, on the other hand, maybe ISIS has offices in Turkey, but I would remind you that Turkey had 148 or 180 prisoners that they exchanged against their own prisoners, their own 46 prisoners with ISIS. So Turkey had ISIS prisoners with them. Why? So my real point here is something totally different. My real point is that Turkey will intervene against ISIS in a way that it does not touch the regime of Bashar al-Assad, in the sense that there will not be clashes between the Syrian army and the Turkish army.
Dr. Tarpley, correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time I checked the NATO charter, and given that Turkey is a NATO member, along with the U.S. and, of course, some of the other regional countries that may be involved in this, isn't it true that NATO countries need to be coordinated with each other were they to attack or go onto another country militarily? And if so, then doesn't that mean that the goals that Turkey has set through its president as prerequisites must be coordinated and agreed upon with the U.S. and its allies? And therefore, if that is true, that perhaps this is just a show that's being portrayed right now, Turkey saying that's what they want, but in essence, it's all of them that agree on the goals that the Turkish president has said?
Well, this is a somewhat chaotic situation, but we can say that ISIS has a consulate in Ankara. There's an official, open, public ISIS consulate where you can go and get a visa to go into Syria, provided, of course, that you're a terrorist fighter. There's also the question of Erdogan's answer to Biden. When Biden made this outburst, which again was a large part of the truth, Erdogan told him, if you don't take that back, you're going to be history. Now, whether that's a threat or not, I don't know, but I can think of some other world leaders where if they said it, that would be considered a very serious threat and a breach of diplomacy against our wonderful vice president here. Now, concerning the show, this is the underlying problem is the U.S. Air Force and Navy, if they wanted to, could certainly clobber these ISIS terrorists around Kobani and disperse them. Not 5 airstrikes or 10. They can mount 50 to 100 per day. They could probably mount 300 to 500 per day if they really wanted to, and if they could use that airfield in Turkey that the Turks are blocking. So what we seem to see here is a phony war. This is a very interesting concept. Remember the winter of 1939 to 1940, when Britain and France were theoretically at war with Hitler, but didn't do anything. They just sat there, right? The drôle de guerre, or Sitzkrieg, as the Germans called it. We seem to have something like that now. It's a kind of a show war, a fake war that seems to been focused on how do you use ISIS to get what you want? How do you use ISIS to try to overthrow the government of Syria? Or in the longer run, we're told that there's a big influx of Chechen fighters from Chechnya, right, from the Caucasus, from Russia. We're told that there are now Uyghurs and Kazakhs that are being integrated massively into ISIS, and they're being brought in by Western intelligence agencies, with the goal being that ISIS would eventually be turned against Russia, among other countries. So you can see how far-ranging this strategic gambit is. And if I may just add one other thing. Here we have the election campaign here in the United States. One thing that's becoming an issue is the open support and fraternization by senators like John McCain of the Republicans and his great friend Lindsey Graham, how much support they're giving to this ISIS. In particular, there's a photograph on the internet which people can see that shows McCain sitting down with a cannibal, the famous cannibal who was filmed eating human heart on...
No, this is totally unacceptable.
Cannibal,
this is totally
kidnapper,
unacceptable.
One cannibal, one kidnapper, and one caliph. That is to say,
this is totally unacceptable.
Alias Baghdadi,
if the gentleman in Washington believes everything he sees on the internet,
up in the U.S. election campaign,
can you please tell me
the efforts
Senator
of our
John
friend in
McCain has
Lebanon
to go and meet with the
it.
people in Al-Qaeda? This is totally ridiculous.
Well, prove him otherwise,
it's in
Jihad
Idlib.
Mouracadeh.
You should check the photograph yourself. Maybe you can contribute to clarifying it. Idlib, Syria,
I have
April
seen the photograph.
2013.
Can you forget the photograph? Think logically. When you want to go and sit with Al-Qaeda, you sent your Senator John McCain to sit with Al-Qaeda. I mean, does this make any sense from a Washington point of view?
When you say logic, we're talking about the logic of late imperialism here, and that can have plenty of surprises.
Can we move on to something a little bit more serious?
Well, why don't you...
Yes. And next time we'll send President Obama also. Why not?
Well, Jihad Mouracadeh, why don't
let's come back to something a little bit more serious, please.
Well, we're trying to get to that, but there's so many contradictions when it comes to the roles that these countries are playing. And I'm talking in particular combining Turkey and the U.S. and ISIL. I mean, clarify for us, what is the game? What is the end game for Turkey? What is the end game for the U.S.? And are they in coordination with each other when it comes to fighting ISIL, and especially when it comes to Syria? Jihad Mouracadeh.
Well, if I can try that. It's extremely... Okay, go ahead.
Okay, you go ahead, Dr. Tarpley. Jihad Mouracadeh, hold on to your thoughts for a second. Hold on, Jihad Mouracadeh.
It's extremely complicated in this sense that we have one part of the U.S. government. We have the CIA is supporting ISIS. We have other parts of the U.S. government that are bombing ISIS, or at least they're making a show of bombing ISIS. Same thing with Saudi Arabia, right? They support ISIS, but they've
Sir, with all due respect, can we come back to the question?
Wait.
And you have to understand that the United States is not of one piece. You have warmonger neocons and humanitarian bombers who would like to use this to get a general war in the Middle East. I don't think Obama is necessarily a part of that group.
Yes, I am here. Can I talk? Because I was answering a question.
Okay. Dr. Tarpley, hold on to your thoughts. Let Jihad Mouracadeh come back because we lost him there for a second. Go ahead, Jihad Mouracadeh.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
I was just... do you hear me?
Yes, we have you. Go ahead.
Okay. I was just mentioning that there is an end game. There is an end game to the situation. The Prime Minister Davutoglu was very clear that he wanted to create a no-fly zone, a deep no-fly zone. The Russians are not going to react to this deep no-fly zone. NATO has already made a statement in support of Turkey to say that Turkey is a member of NATO and any attack against Turkey is an attack against everyone else. The NATO nation, the military, the Turkish military already coordinates with the American military through NATO, so they do not need to reorganize themselves. In my opinion, the end game is once Turkey occupies a no-fly zone or a deep no-fly zone, then there will be some pressure on the Syrian regime to come back to Geneva I to negotiate with the Syrian opposition. And I do not believe anything about the Free Syrian Army being ready in 3 years. It is not a 3-year thing with regards to Syria. It is more like a 6 to 9 month thing. Once the Turkish military has invaded part of Syria without touching the Syrian army, because this is a deal, okay, then the Syrians will sit down and negotiate with the support of Russia and America. Now, the Turkish troops are the troops on the ground in Syria. In Iraq, you have the Iraqi army, the Peshmerga, and hopefully the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. All of this with support from the U.S. Air Force and allied air forces all over, depending. But basically, the end game, as you asked me, is Geneva I for Syria and an agreement, a power-sharing agreement in Iraq.
Dr. Tarpley, do you agree?
Again, I think there are different factions, and these different factions have different apocalyptic programs. As far as Turkey is concerned, though, this is very clear. When you say no-fly zone, you're talking about a bombing campaign to wipe out the entire Syrian Air Force and then grabbing an entire stretch, a slice of northern Syria.
The Syrian Air Force will not intervene.
Essentially making that into a paradise for terrorists, because that's what that would be. If you carve out an area in the north, no, they won't intervene. They'll be bombed.
It will be under Turkish control, and the Syrian Air Force will not intervene.
It will be on Syrian territory invaded by Turkey, violation of international law. We need a Security Council session about that.
It's not
and
Syrian
that
territory.
So-called no-fly zone will be a happy hunting ground for terrorists, a privileged sanctuary for terrorists on Syrian soil, protected by Turkey.
Can I intervene?
That's the way it's going. You look, people know you've had enough.
Can I intervene?
Syria, Iran, Hezbollah fight ISIS. These other people don't seem to.
Now you can go ahead. Jihad Mouracadeh.
You are not in the region, sir. You do not follow these things. The Syrian government would never intervene.
I'm not at the bar of the St. George Hotel in Beirut. No,
the Israeli Air Force has bombed them 5 times already. They don't intervene. In Deir ez-Zor,
they choose carefully.
Bombed. It is part of the so-called Syrian territory, and there is no regime there.
Now, why do you say that the Syrian army is not going to intervene?
There. They cannot claim it's a Syrian territory.
Jihad Mouracadeh, why would the Syrian Air Force not intervene?
First of all, because when the Americans strike Deir ez-Zor area and all these areas taken by ISIS, at the beginning they claimed that they would consider it as an attack against Syrian territory and they will intervene. They did not do anything. When the Israeli aircrafts bombed various targets in Syria over the last 5 years, they said they will intervene, and they did not intervene. The Syrian army doesn't want to intervene because they would rather let the Turks do the job for them. The Turkish army is going to take all this area because this area there is no presence. The Syrian army and the Syrian regime does not exist in the area. So basically, when they are taking over, they are not taking over a part of the Syrian geographical area, of course, but not of the Syrian political area because there is no Syrian army there.
Okay,
so as far
let me come in then to Dr. Tarpley. Dr.
They would
Tarpley,
say thank you very much.
Curious as to
the
why.
The same way that said to the Americans, thank you very much, you're getting us rid of ISIS.
Dr. Tarpley, quickly if you can, last question. Leon Panetta, the ex-defense secretary, this war is going to last for decades. He mentioned 30 years. Sounds like the U.S. wants this to continue. Obviously, Obama has also come out saying this is going to take years, including General Martin Dempsey. So are we looking at a conflict that's going to last for years in the region?
You may be, because you have these warmongers, right? McCain, Lindsey Graham, Robert Gates, former Secretary of Defense, and Panetta, right? These are the officials, the functionaries of the war party. They've always been there, right? The combination of neocons and humanitarian bombers. I think Obama, slightly different. Obama is not committed to such a strategy, but you have to remember, we've just had the Secret Service scandal here. We find that Obama practically is a president who is not told when there are attacks on him or security breaches that can be very serious. They don't even tell him. He's not even informed. So we have an acute faction fight going on here between a war party and a group around Obama in the White House, which is much more reluctant, right? That's what every Republican is now screaming, that Obama is too reluctant. Obama is not the warmonger that they wanted. McCain, Graham, they're demanding the immediate bombing of all of Syria. And remember, when you say no-fly zone, that means a carpet bombing of all of Syria, every airport, every air base, every hangar, every facility. There's no such thing as a cheap, easy, marginal no-fly zone. It implies a total attack. And if Syria sees a total attack as distinct from these Israeli pinpricks, then they're going to respond. And then you may be on the way to World War III.
Okay.
And
I'm sorry, we're fresh out of time. Thank you very much for that.
Is any of this worth
Author and historian Dr. Webster Griffin Tarpley there talking to us from Washington. And thank you, Jihad Mouracadeh, political commentator who spoke to us from Beirut. Thanks so much for tuning in to another edition of The Debate. From me, the entire team in the capital, Tehran. It's goodbye.